There's no reason why that couldn't be your story.
You don't have an expiration date.
Ooh, I love that.
The actual pages. Like, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
This is the Authors and Agents Podcast. Victoria, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to chat with you and super excited to hear about your debut novel, How to Find a Missing Girl. So could you please tell me about it?
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. So my book, How to Find a Missing Girl, is a sapphic young thriller that is coming out on September 19th, 2023 from Little Brown Books for Young Readers. It follows a 17-year-old amateur sleuth named Iris and her sapphic detective agency as they work together for what happened to Iris's podcaster ex-girlfriend who ran a podcast called How to Find a Missing Girl about Iris's missing older sister who disappeared a year prior.
I love it. And I love the comps that it's like a good girl's guide to murder meets Veronica Mars. Like that's, exactly what you want it to be.
Yeah, those are very big inspirations of me for me for sure.
I love it. Well, so this is so exciting. You have your debut novel coming out into the world. I'm sure this is something you've been working towards for a long time. So tell me a little bit about your journey to this point to being published.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really a long journey. I feel like I've been working towards publication in some way or another for a really long time without even realizing it. I started when I was 14 years old and I was introduced to National Novel Writing Month, or
Mm,
NaNoWriMo time. So that was when I kind of wrote my first book, 50,000 words in a month. And I just fell in love with the program and was doing it ever since. So all through high school, basically one book every month in November. But it wasn't until I think my junior year of high school where I was like, oh, like publishing, like I should look into this. And I stumbled across Pitch Wars, which sadly
mm,
doesn't anymore. But
sadly.
it was a really fantastic mentorship program where you could be mentored by a debut author or an established, traditionally published author. And so that was my first gateway to actually the traditional publishing industry. I was like going through all these blog posts and I was like, oh, agents exist. That's really cool and really I was reading all these MSWLs, or manuscript wish lists, and it got my gears turning about what people were actually wanting to see in the industry. And I realized that I'd always wanted to write a thriller. I loved reading them. So after I submitted one of the throwaway manuscripts that will probably now never see the light of day, I started working on the book for my senior senior year NaNoWriMo that eventually became How to Find the and I did not get selected for Pitch Wars, which is probably a good thing. But I actually, submitting to the contest gave me the confidence to kind of submit to literary agents after I had finished yet another manuscript. And then I kind of went through the querying process, which I can talk about, and the publishing process in that way. And it was really, really, it was just exciting to me. I don't know. I feel like I hadn't really been burned or jaded. I was just really um, but just very, very excited to kind of be working towards something real. But without being introduced, I think first to National Novel Writing Month and then to Pitch Wars, I would have never known about it. So it was very lucky.
That's very lucky. And yeah, NaNoWriMo is such a great program. I love it. I've done it several times, and there's something so satisfying in being about like, wow, look at how much I wrote in 1 month's time. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love seeing the counter go up.
Yes, yes. I love getting all the badges too. Like I'm like, how many badges can I get?
Collector. So
Yes. So tell me about querying. So you had finished this, manuscript that, was How to Find a Missing Girl, and how did you go about querying?
yeah, probably badly. Feel like my journey was definitely not typical. And again, it was because of something that existed when I was in the querying trenches that does not exist anymore, or variations of it do. But so yeah, but I had made a lot of friends through writing Twitter, which also
Hmm.
kind of not not around as
No.
and like great as it used to be. I think a lot of people are migrating, which makes sense. But I had made a lot of friends who were kind of like writing similar genres or had similar interests and age levels and were writing similar things. And so we would critique each other's work, we would swap, we would query at the same time, we would build our lists together. And that's another thing that really came out of kind of pitch wars for me. So even though I hadn't been selected, I made some really awesome friends through the process and just by virtue of being on writing Twitter. But when I started querying, I was just cold querying and it was going fine. But what really sped up the process was participating in DV Pit or Dev Pit. And when I did that, which is, again, a Twitter pitch contest where industry professionals kind of lurk through hashtags, and then if you pitch your book in however many characters were allowed back then, I think it was 280 per tweet.
Yeah.
And hope that a literary agent or even an editor sees it and likes it and says basically of liking the tweet, like, hey, I want to see this, I want to look at it. And I'd gotten pretty lucky, and I'd gotten a few likes that way. And it really was like, oh, I liked one of the agents who saw my tweets was like, oh, I like this, like, please, like, requested the full. And then she made an offer, I think, within like a week or so. So I'd really only been querying for 35 days. Before my first offer came in, but it was all about luck and timing, and if that event hadn't been going on, I think it would have been much, much longer. But after that call and initial offer, it kind of snowballed from there, so then I asked for 2 weeks to decide. I let all the other offering agents know, ended up getting 4 other offers, and picking the agent that I wanted to go with. It was a very, very stressful time.
I bet.
September that it was all happening. It was September of my freshman year at college, so I was like 18 years old. I was trying to settle into my classes, into my school, and now I was like being faced with this decision that I was like very aware would impact like the rest of my life and my career. So very, very stressful, and I talked to a lot of people. I talked to clients, I talked to my friends, but ended up signing with Jessica Herrera at Jane Rosen Literary Agency, and that was just the decision that like felt right, and I think it was because like we're still together, and I'm super, super happy. And we ended up kind of like editing my book together for about 3 months, and then went on sub in January the following year. So, and then sold the book in February. So it was really like a whirlwind, and I don't think it's a typical story at all. It really was just luck and timing and being in the right place at the right time. And I feel like it's a lot harder now because those communities are becoming fewer and fewer. But I definitely owe a lot to writing Twitter, to my friends, and to the people who created these kinds of events for underrepresented authors. It's a very like queer book. It's a very LGBTQ book, just like me. And so being able to kind of pitch it that way, and 2 people who were like looking for that, was very lucky, and I think got me the door that way.
I think it's, I love asking this question and just hearing different authors' journeys because everybody's is so different. There's people who, like you, have kind of like a whirlwind. They had those great pitch contests on Twitter, which, aren't so much around anymore, that can really help the querying process, right? So much faster than cold querying over and over and over again. But I love what you said. It was luck and timing. And I think sometimes other authors who aren't represented yet or are just sitting there waiting, like seeing all their friends, they're like, oh, why can't that be me? Like sometimes that really is what it's about. It's about luck. It's about timing. I just saw something from an agent that was like, when someone even sends you a pass, like it might not be because your writing's, it's usually not because your writing's bad. It's just because it's not the right fit, right? Like we feel that way when we get a rejection, like, oh, it's because I'm a terrible writer. But there's so many different factors that go into that decision.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, absolutely, like I don't think publishing is a meritocracy. I don't think the best books get the most money or the book deals. I think it's a business, and that's kind of the hard thing sometimes if you're not writing things that people think will sell, and the things that they
Yeah.
think sell usually are the things that are not being represented and not given a chance to sell in the first place. It's harder and harder to break in. So.
Definitely. So, looking back on your journey, looking back on your experience, and with what you know now, being in the industry for longer, what would your top query tip be for authors who are in the query trenches right now?
Yeah, I think it's cliche, but I think if you can handle it, don't give up. Like a lot of people do decide to give up or give up writing or give up querying or self-publish, and I think if that's the right decision for you, then absolutely. But if you've only been querying for a couple months, if you've only been querying for 6 months or a year, and even if you have people who are getting these really quick, really fast deals, just because those are the flashy stories doesn't mean that that's how it is like 9 out of 10.
Mhm.
So I think not getting discouraged, kind of developing that thick skin, but also know if you've had it and if you want to step out of the game, it's totally okay. I would also say don't chase trends, because everything
Mm.
comes and goes, and if you can get a book written in 2 weeks, then it's romantasy, and it's the next fourth wing, then perfect. But I think ultimately, like as writers, we have to like feed our souls and make ourselves happy. So keeping the market in mind, I think, is important, and knowing that publishing is a business, and if you want to get into that business, sometimes you have to play the game. But also not really selling out too much, like you still have to write things that are important to you. So I think it's a delicate balance. It's definitely a thing that is hard to keep in mind and hard to walk. It's a hard line to walk. But I think that's what I would say is like, don't give up, but if you have to, you can, and it's okay. And don't feel like you have to be doing what everybody else is doing, because who knows, in a couple years, who knows, like maybe we'll be looking for the exact thing that you've written and it's the market just isn't ready yet.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's such great advice. It's tempting to want to write with the trends, right? Like everyone's going to be adding dragons into their stories even more now, but it's like I think you can tell when something's like authentically what somebody is writing of their heart as opposed to when they're trying to write for the market, just solely for the market, right? Yeah. So thank you for that answer. I think that's a great tips and good things for writers to keep in mind. My next question for you is a two-parter. So I'd love to know, first off, what's the hardest part of writing for you? And then so far, being an author, what is the hardest part of that?
I think that's actually really easy for me to answer because I feel like there's so many hard parts. But a writer is definitely pushing through that first draft, like
Mm,
confidence in myself and my process. I feel like it's really often said like don't compare your book, like your work in progress, to like published book. I feel like, so as somebody who's like working on their second book, I have also this unique problem of like comparing my first draft to like the book that I have already published. So it's hard for me to be like, oh, like it's all gonna work out, like it's gonna be okay, like I just have to get it down on the page and then I can revise it and edit it and make it better. Kind of like relearning to trust myself, and that process has
mm.
been challenging. So I would say that's the hardest part of being a writer, is just figuring out, pinning everything down, and being like, okay, I did it once, I can do it again. That's kind of the current struggle that I'm going through. And I would say the hardest part of being an author for me is just juggling all the responsibilities and duties that come with it on top of everything else I have going on. So I'm a full time college student. I'm a double major. So
Wow.
being an author and all the career, like writing another book and promoting the first one and doing things and meeting people. Even though I love all of it, it's just the balance is difficult. So I would say that's probably the hardest part. But everything that's good about writing and being an author, I think, outweighs all the hard things, even when they are really hard.
I think you're right there. So tell me about the best things about writing and the best thing about being an author.
Yeah, I think the best thing about writing for me is that it's so like I'm the happiest when I am writing, and it's hard to like sit down and like do it sometimes, but it's like whenever I am doing it, I just feel like this is what I would do. Like it's just so relaxing for me. Like it just, even if it's not going well, I'm so happy to be doing it. So just the act of writing, I think the writing itself is a gift. And being able to do it is just incredible. And similarly, like being an author, I think the best part is just like living my dream, because I've published author ever since I was 5 years old. Like, it's literally been like my number one goal, like on the bucket list, but it's always kind of been this unachievable, like unattainable thing. I never thought that I'd actually be able to do it, let alone so young. So it's just crazy. Like, I just like look at, like, I jolt awake, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna be published next month. So I think that's just the best part for me, like being able to do the writing and being able to be an author.
Oh, I love it. Yes. I mean, when you've been working towards something for so long and you had this dream since you were a kid, I mean, that's amazing. And I can't wait for you to continue on and have people, the masses read your book and then to be able to connect with people like that. It's going to be great.
Yeah, very excited.
Yes. So, my next question for you is about the writing process. So, you're saying, for you, the first draft is
Mhm.
kind of a challenge, and I'm with you there. First drafts are hard. So, when you're drafting that, though, are you like a hardcore planner and you follow your outline? Do you like more right by the seat of your pants, or are you somewhere in between?
I'm definitely a pantser, so definitely, like, I feel like I have to go into a story going to happen. Like, I typically, even like writing thrillers, I don't know who the bad guy is. I don't know like what the crime is. Like, I don't know what's happened. I just have like something, some kind of image or idea has like captured my fancy, and it's like, okay, like what else is going on? So I'm very much like a discovery writer. I love
Hmm.
keeping it interesting for myself, and I feel like part of that comes from being a thriller and mystery reader. I don't like knowing what's gonna happen. I like figuring it out. I'm writing stories, like for me, that fun part is figuring it out. And I like to think that I keep myself on my toes that way, and by extension, my readers will also be on their toes because I can surprise myself, then the readers will also be surprised. And it has to be within reason, it has to make sense. But um, so that's what's really fun for me. Lately, though, I feel like I've become more of a plotter. I'm still a pantser, but now I'm more of like a plancer.
Yeah.
As just with everything like juggling all of these plot threads and trying to plot out a book, even if I can't really go to my editor and be like, okay, so here's my next book idea and it's just vibes, please approve it. So I would love it if that was the case, or I would love a 5-page synopsis, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do that. um, but I've had to learn. So it's been definitely like a different type of experience for me. And I hate to report that it's honestly easier to do the writing. Knowing where you're going, having a roadmap
Uh-huh.
definitely like helped me, which I'm like, no, no, the plotters were right all along. Um,
Mm.
but I don't think you can ever like stop me from being a pantser, and I think it's just really cool that every writer has their own process. So learning things from other people, taking pages out of the plotter's book, is fun for me, but I have to keep something up in the air always, just to keep myself interested. Otherwise, I'll abandon the project and it will never get finished.
Yeah. No, I think that you can still, like you said, you can be a planter where you have like vague ideas, right? Like you have points you want to get to, but then you get to pants your way to them, right? I mean, that's where you can allow yourself. And I like that. I love to write mysteries and as well. And I feel like for me too, I always want to surprise myself as well because as a very vast reader of them, I hate when I'm like 25% of the way into the book and I'm like, okay, I know exactly where this is going. I know exactly who it is, right? So like I want to be the one too that is very similar. So yeah, you got to keep the writing process fun for yourself. Otherwise, it makes it a lot. It makes it very hard to keep going.
But for me, it's like, why would I tell a story that I already know the ending to? Or
Yeah,
so I really think it's important to keep it fun because I think it's supposed to be enjoyable.
I think so too. So now you have your lovely agent, you have your lovely editor who helps you with the revision process. But what do you do beforehand, before you send things off to your agent to make sure that like your manuscript is in tip-top shape?
Yeah, it's a great question. Usually I rewrite like countless drafts over and over. So usually like the first draft or like the zero draft is just absolutely terrible and unreadable. And then I go through and sometimes I don't even read it. Sometimes it's just helped figure out the truth of the story and then I write another draft. And then usually I'll go and read that one, and then I'm like, I pick out and I pull things, and then I write in between the lines. When I'm writing, though, I write out of order, so I don't write. So sometimes it's a matter of, okay, does this make sense? Does it flow? Like, I didn't know this was happening when I wrote this. I have to go back and like make sure things are consistent. Consistency is, oh, sorry.
You're
I feel
okay.
it's probably one of the hardest things for me to do when I'm revising. So that's something that I really want to be sure to nail down. I have critique partners, and it's more so critique partners now. I used to have beta readers, and I still do have some. But or even I'll send like them one scene and be like, here's the context. Can you let me know how this is reading? But definitely lots of rounds of revision, lots of red pen, lots of being very critical to myself in the comments of the Google Doc. It's like fix this or like reword or like make this better or like why did you write?
Yes. Yes.
Um, Go back and I'm like, oh yeah, I was right. Like this isn't good. I'm very good at identifying when something isn't working. I feel like it's harder for me to come up with a solution. So sometimes identifying the problem is the easy part, and then I have to sit or sleep on something
Mm.
a few weeks to figure out how I'm going to solve everything. So it's a very extensive revision process. And then, of course, I go back and forth like with my agent and my editor, and having those industry eyes is very helpful because they usually know what I'm trying to say better than I do most of the time. So that's been like a really awesome new thing that I'm also learning how to deal with. And that kind of push and pull of like, okay, what is the proper vision for the story? Like, you have an idea, I have a different idea. Let's meet in the middle and make something even better. So that kind of collaborative process has been really eye-opening, and I feel like it's really helped me grow as a writer. So I'm just excited to kind of keep doing it. I would be very happy if I could get it down to less drafts, though. I,
Yes.
I would like to write less drafts before a book is done, but I'm also trying to come to terms with my own creative process, and that might just be part of it.
Well, and it might just be part of it, but it also could just be part of it for now, right? Like as I look back at all the different manuscripts I finished, like you change throughout the process. So the more you do this, the more you'll kind of refine what works for you. And if it is a lot of drafts, then it's a lot of drafts. But you could get to the point where you're like, okay, I can actually not do a next draft, right? But I loved your comment about leaving yourself comments in the Google Docs. Like I always write be better or just like really like, like come on.
Yes. I kind of love beating myself up because then it's fun to be like, yeah, she's so right, and it's me. So
Right. And then you can do it better and you're like, okay, look, see, I did.
it's very like you feel good after you make something better.
Yes, for sure. So I just have a few questions left for you. They're easy breezy, fun questions. So I'd love for you to share with me something that your readers might not, know about you.
Okay, so I was thinking about this. I was like, what would they not know? And I feel like I don't know if they know this or not. But I hate like true crime podcasts
Oh,
of them. Like I can't listen to them. It's not like I don't really have a problem with them per se. I just like I'm too scared to listen to them. So the fact that I wrote a book that such like a huge way and like has a multimedia element with like a podcast, like I had to go brave like the Spotify waters, and be like, how does this really work? Because it's just I'm not a true crime podcast fan myself. So it's been a really fun like process, like getting to know that world and like diving in and really doing research. But I think the problem is that I'm just like too scared, and it's the same with like horror movies or even thriller films. I can't read that. I can't watch them, but I love reading them. So anything scary that I can kind of read, I'm okay with. But anything that I have to listen to or see, I can't do.
I am, you're not alone in that. I used to be like huge true crime podcaster listener, and now I just can't listen to them. They're just, oh, too much. There's too
Yeah.
much. And horror movies too, in the last couple years, I just can't watch them. they're too much for me. And so I think it's different when you're reading because you control so much of what the image is in your mind as opposed to watching it. And then those images never leave your mind. And you could be like, I can still see The Haunting of Hill House, the Netflix TV show, in my mind right this moment and how terrifying it is. Like
Right.
it's
It's
different than reading a book.
So I think there's something there, but I'm just so fascinated with reading them. Maybe also because I haven't seen that many or listened to as many scary things. So consuming that type of media, my editor and I, we always say like my book is like scary for like people who don't like scary things. Like it's kind of the perfect amount of true crime. I feel like because it's not too terrifying, but it hopefully it still like keeps you up at night.
Well, that's good. That's a good balance. I'm okay with that. So I'd love to know how many bookshelves you have. The question says in your house, but it might just be your dorm room. How many do you have in your dorm room?
So I am in a dorm and I only have like one real bookshelf, but I
Yeah.
have piles of books everywhere. So like literally next to me right now, and they pile up, and so I
Oh,
have
yeah.
and just like stacks all over. I have ebooks on my NetGalley shelf that I still have to read. I just keep checking out books from the library. I keep buying them, and I don't have a space. I don't have space for them. But it's just like piles. I feel like if you put it all together, it'd be way more bookshelves. But then in my room at home, I have 6 bookshelves, I think, so a lot.
Whoa, that is a lot. So you've got lots of bookshelves and book piles. We all have those. We do. So my last question for you is an easy one, I promise. I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. Not your favorite book of all time, just something you've read recently that you just need everybody to know about.
Yeah, so easy. My favorite book right now is Their Vicious Games by Joelle
Mm,
Welly. It's a young adult thriller that just came out last month, I think on July 25th. Um, and it is incredible. It's Squid Games meets The Bachelor meets the 2019 horror movie Ready or Not. And it's just so well written. It's incredible. There's like so much commentary on like racism and classism, but there's also this like not quite romance subplot that I was just absolutely obsessed with. It follows a black teenager named Adina Walker who has to participate in this deadly competition called the which is like for only the elitist of the elite at her like private prep school, for a chance to get back into Yale, her dream Ivy League.
mm.
And it's so fun. It's so like campy and scary and really, really awesome. I just had such a blast reading it. I finished it and I was like, oh my God. So I need everybody to read it if they haven't already because I think it's so fun and I think it's like a perfect encapsulation of like how amazing YA thrillers can be and where the genre is going.
I love it. I've seen that one's actually on my desk right now
You
in one of my desk piles to be read.
should-
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And, I'm so excited to have How to Find a Missing Girl come out and for everybody to rave over it for you. It's been such a blast getting to know you and for, the tips and everything that you shared on the podcast today for those who are listening. I thank you so much for it.
Thank you so much for having me.